Big boy.
Alright, so welcome to a new episode of Federo Speaks, a very special episode where I've invited some very special guest panelists to participate in the conversation. Today we will be discussing a topic that is near and dear to my heart. It's definitely not one that is easy to discuss, but it's definitely one that I believe is necessary for our community, both as far as men as well as our community at large. This is a topic that not only affects us in the U.S. but affects us globally, and that topic is suicide. And so before we begin the conversation, I want to just state that the information presented in this discussion may be triggering to some people. If you have any suicidal thoughts, contact the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. Again, that's 1-800-273-8255 for support and assistance from a trained counselor. If you have or if you or your loved ones are in immediate danger, I encourage you to call 911. So with that said, as I stated, my Alexa is going off, but as I stated, the conversation that we'll be discussing is suicide. This particular conversation is important to me because I feel like over the course of the past year, specifically during the time of the pandemic, I definitely began to struggle with my mental health, and I definitely began to experience what I would call suicidal ideations, where I would sit around and just wonder, why am I here? What's my purpose? At first I was thinking it was a midlife crisis, because I'm getting close to my 40s. So I'm like, oh my God. But I realized that it could have been, and it likely was, a result of a number of different factors that as a man we don't discuss well in our community, and from a personal perspective, I'm not sure that I even had the language to really communicate what was going on with me at the time. What I do know is that I felt like I was in a dark place. So over the pandemic, ended up moving to LA from Chicago and just found my life uprooted, and all of the plans and the things that I had intended to do coming into the year of 2020 just seemed like they all just went poof. So I just found myself someone who is rather structured, organized, and very good at just planning and seeing life ahead and kind of bringing those things that I want to do into fruition. I found myself just completely lost and feeling out of control. And I found myself one day just what felt like a dark place. Just I can't even find any other words, but it just felt really dark. And what I reference it to, not to sound too deep or spiritual, was like the valley of the shadow of death, where it just felt like death was really close. Like at any moment, something was gonna come and get me, or I felt like this huge sense of despair where it was like, yo, take your own life. Get yourself out of here before something in LA or something spooky comes and get you or whatnot. And I hit panic. And it was a series of things that I did that I'm looking back now that I recognize helped to bring me out of that state of depression, anxiety, and ultimately those feelings of suicide. So fast forward to 2021. We had the Meghan Markle interview with Oprah and Prince Harry. And during that interview, Meghan expressed that at some point in her life, she was suicidal, at the peak of marrying Harry and so forth. And people did not know how close she was to suicide. She was pregnant at the time, and she was, contemplating taking both her baby and herself out. And I found that really profound due to the fact that many people may have coveted her life, looked at her like, whoa, like she is doing a thing. She's marrying a prince. But I found it fascinating to think that suicide had touched her life in the castle. Suicide had touched my life in my apartment. Suicide was evidently touching the lives of those around me. I know 6 people who have died or experienced suicide within this year, which made me realize that this is a prevalent conversation that we need to begin to have. So, with that said, I want to open the conversation up to the gentlemen that are on the panel and give you guys the opportunity to introduce yourselves. What I want you to do is state who you are, state your age if you don't mind, and also state your background, both professionally or religious wise. And we can start off with Robert.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robert Siler. I am a young age of 51. I am by profession a college transition specialist. I've been working with middle schoolers transitioning to high school and the high schoolers transitioning to college for about 20 years. I'm also just recently, when I say recently, maybe in the past 10 years or so, got involved with some of the therapeutic work that comes with working with traumatized youth as a youth support specialist. And that's been a great bridge between both professions, because a lot of the youth that I'm working with in public schools or private schools or even on their way to college have experienced some sort of trauma.
Awesome. Thank you for the introduction, Robert. Next, we have Darren Calhoun.
Hey everybody, I'm glad to be here. As always, my name is Darren Calhoun, pronouns he, him. I am joining from Chicago at the ripe young age of 41 years old. I am a Christian or a follower of Christ, and my work has been for the past 2 decades or so, rallying people around racial justice and LGBTQ inclusion in churches, seeking to address the policies as well as the kind of myths and narratives that create oppression and create the barriers that we have to true community. So most of the ways that I do that is through sharing stories and sharing my own experiences, but also advocating for those who are outside of my particular experiences as well. I feel like uh, there's a lot going on, and so often we talk about things from the perspective of topics rather than from the perspective of people and their experiences. And so I just try to help us humanize these stories and make these abstract ideas into real stories. So glad to be here.
Thank you for sharing that, Darren. I like the way you put that. Next, we have Michael Ballard. Michael, if you haven't noticed, you're on mute, but I ask that you unmute yourself if you can, and introduce yourself, sir.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I am Michael Ballard. I am 43 and a half years old. I am in Miami Beach, Florida, South Beach, by way of Chicago, Illinois. I am a entertainer, content creator. I'm also a pastor. And I also have a practice where me and my wife, we basically take failing Christian marriages and turn them around to God ordained marriages. Um, and I have been in ministry since 16. I've been a pastor since 2014. And I definitely work with a lot of pastors now that deal with depression, which 73% of pastors deal with depression. Past suicide amongst pastors is very high. And dealing with a lot of husbands that are in traumatic marriages, a lot of them are dealing with suicidal thoughts and tendencies. Um, Fortunately, especially with a lot of Black men. So definitely interested in diving deep into the topic, giving my word on it, and learning from you guys as well. I'm very interested in that.
Awesome. Michael, I asked that you mute yourself again because there's a little background noise, but we did hear you. If you want, you can go to your audio settings and adjust the, I think Darren put it in there, but adjust the suppressed background noise setting. I believe it's one where it's like high, low, medium, and then auto. If you want to try to pick the adjustment that best fits. Oh, that's my mic too? My mic got background? Okay, so let
Just a
me.
little bit.
Yeah, I got that fan going too. It's hot here in LA. Okay, so let me try this. Is that better?
That's better.
Okay, yeah, I had the original sound on. Okay.
Oh yeah, original sound to do that.
That part. All right, so thank you for letting me know. So yeah. So thank you, guys. Welcome once again. I appreciate just you guys taking the time to join this discussion. I appreciate you seeing this as important enough to carve out some time in your day to offer yourself, your expertise, as Darren said, your experience to the conversation. To start off, I want to state that the goal of the conversation is to discuss the personal, professional, and cultural implications of suicide, particularly among men in the US. To bring the topic of suicide out of the realm of taboo and to discuss it as a personal and global health issue. Also to understand that suicidal thoughts occur amongst most men at some point in life and can be a reoccurring sign of a mental health issue. Lastly, to understand that suicide can be prevented, and we all have a role to play in both education and the prevention of suicide. Cool. Any questions? Cool. All right. So let's get it started. I'm excited. So I'll start with you, Robert. How is the topic of suicide important to you personally, from a personal perspective? You're on mute if you
Keep my etiquette going. It's important to me personally because I've experienced it with family members, and it. I didn't think that it would just, like, when I think about suicide, I don't think it even existed in Black culture, to be honest, and especially with males. And in both instances, these were two very strong, very intelligent, independent men that, without my knowledge of anything, just one day just up decide to just take their lives. And you know, outside of a feeling of feeling hopeless, you know, I said, man, I have to try to educate myself about suicide and shift the lens on what could I have done, which I mean, I'm sure that I still feel like it's something that I probably could have done, but in other words, how do I move forward? You know, and possibly prevent something like this from happening again.
Thank you, Robert. Can I ask, were there any signs or signals that you feel like were given that were seen, or ones that were possibly missed with the two gentlemen?
You know what? I can honestly say no. As a matter of fact, in each instance, I spent a significant amount of time with them before it happened. Whether we were just hanging out, going to see relatives, you know, all day, and the next day I hear something tragic happen. So that was, to my knowledge, there was like no breadcrumbs, nothing.
All right, thank you for sharing. Next question is for Darren. Darren, the suicide rate for men in 2017, they haven't released anything that's more current. But for men was 3.5 times higher than that of women. Why do you think that is from your perspective?
Oh, this is going to be a long one,
All right.
but there are a few factors that kind of intersect here in what we know about um, the way masculinity, the way being a man is defined in the United States. And then it gets even more specific when you break it down into race and part of the country. But one of the things that's really important here is that men have been told that we're supposed to be the breadwinners and we're supposed to be strong, we're supposed to be stoic or not show emotion. We're supposed to be able to work hard and provide for a family in a world that is no longer set up for those things to be default or true. And so what happens is men from literally from childhood are given all these demands and expectations, given all these ideals to fit into that aren't based on real people, but are more like personifications of like you got to be a man's man, and however you define that, which changes drastically from person to person, it's something that's idealized and not based in reality. And so you have generations of men growing up taught not to cry, not to express their emotions, to only you only encourage the expressions of anger or violence. Um, and in doing so, uh, we shift onto women all the emotional labor, all the ways that you process things. And so to be a healthy man, you have to find a good woman, because again, men are somehow rendered incomplete by the ways we tell them not to process their emotions. And then we're in a society that is saying, oh, well, be a man, work hard, and you'll be okay. But we're in a society where your jobs aren't guaranteed for 20, 30 years anymore. We're in a society where access to mental health is so scarce and so difficult. And there's so many barriers to that. And so what we see as far what there's a measure called death by despair, and what we see is that men are turning to alcohol, they're turning, alcohol, turning to drugs, if you want to separate those two, turning to various forms of addiction. And when that despair is too great, it ultimately can end up in suicide. And what's essentially happening is men have been promised a world that's kind of centered and catered to them that doesn't exist anymore. And they're trying to live into these ideals, trying to live into these demands that are completely unreasonable. And it becomes despairing. And so you see every expression of this, from white men wearing khaki pants and polo shirts marching through the streets with tiki torches chanting, "You will not replace us." Who's trying to replace you? Nobody's trying to replace you, but the idea has been sold since the beginning of this country that the black people, that the Latino people are trying to replace the poor white people. And the reality is the rich people set all of this up so that we constantly be in competition with each other. And then for black men, you have this idea that we are either lazy or that we are violent mandingo beasts that are going to be a threat to white women. And so we're working against these ideals where we are shaped in this hyper masculine um, reality, where we're constantly having to live up to a produced image that we see in a music video or in a movie. And again, not able to be the full expressions of ourselves as artists, as creatives, as nurturers, as caregivers, as all these other things. And so we keep running into these ideals that tell us that we're not enough. We keep running into these ideals that tell us that we are somehow failing at being men, and we end up, instead of pulling ourselves up by these fictional bootstraps, instead we create these scenarios where people are like, it's hopeless, it's pointless, and they despair, and some eventually attempt to take their lives.
So thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. Michael Ballard, I have a question for you. Are you there?
Yes, sir. Is that better with my volume?
Yes, sir. I appreciate it.
Okay.
So here's a question. Suicide is rated at as a fourth leading cause of death amongst men and individuals, particularly between the ages of 35 and 44. As a man who is within that age range, what is significant about this period of time in a man's life that you think is causing men to despair of life significantly higher at this age?
I'm sorry, you're breaking up. My connection is pretty bad. I apologize.
No
What was
problem.
the age? What was the age group that you
The
said again?
age group is 35 to 44.
Oh yeah. Well, in my opinion, because I deal with that age group a lot in my counseling sessions, and I think Brother Darren really hit it on the head. I think it's the stigma that men are supposed to be tough. We say a lot of times we deal with daddy issues, but men deal with, we don't really have them. We don't have fathers, and so we don't really know. You guys hear me?
Michael, you breaking up a little bit.
You guys hear me?
We hear you, but it's choppy.
And so, you talking with you guys are dealing with daddy issues and things like. You guys, it's choppy.
Yeah, it's coming at a delay.
Hello?
Yes, there's a slight delay.
Hello, you guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. But there's a slight delay.
Miami Beach. Miami Beach. Okay, I apologize. Miami Beach has a really bad with Wi-Fi. So if you guys can hear me, what I was saying was, I think what Brother Darren was saying is true, again, about the stigma of being that age group and really having to deal with daddy issues. A lot of times, aggression, and what it looks like to be a man, not having or toxic masculinity from the pimps, the hustlers, the uncles, the people in our lives. And so we really don't have a place to process that pent up frustration, those emotions, and we just explode because, again, we are told to be strong men. Being out here in Miami Beach, we see a lot of young ladies out, a lot of young ladies with their boys, and I've seen countless times that these women would beat these little boys and tell them stop crying, man up, and that just carries over to them to being older. And I see a lot of guys out here. When I tell you the guys out here, man, it breaks my heart because they really don't know what being a man really is. They don't know. And there's no clear definition of what that looks like. And so they're confused, they're frustrated, they don't know what that is. And they're just exploding, taking out that aggression and not having a place to speak to. And then even I know in certain cultures with certain women that even when a man does express his feelings, the women look at him as being weak or being a punk. There's this guy, I don't know if you guys heard of a guy named Kevin Samuels, who's extremely popular in these streets. And I saw him once talk to a brother, and the brother was trying to tell him, he was trying to express his thoughts to his woman. And Kevin Samuels said, don't you ever express your thoughts to a woman because you're going to be considered a punk if you do that. And this guy has hundreds of thousands of followers. And he's a voice to men on how to be a man. And so where else do we turn? If it's not the bottle, if it's not the drugs, it's the gun. So that's what I believe is being happening in the society.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. You mentioned something about what it means to be a man. So we have 4 men here, each with their own background, experience, and so forth. I would like for you to describe or explain in your own opinion, as a man, what is it to be a man in your opinion? And we can start with Robert, go to Darren, Michael, and then I'll share my perspective as well. You're on mute, Mike. I mean, Robert.
Oh wow, that is a simple but profound question, and actually one that the answer will continue to evolve as the person does. Um, when I think about what it takes to be a man, I think about mastering things that lead up to manhood. Learning how to be that uh, receptive son to your parents and their guidance. Learning how to be a sibling to your brothers and sisters. Learning how to be a friend. Um, and that's something that you choose. Learning that you have that choice about friendships and what those mean to you. And then ultimately getting into young adulthood and eventually becoming a man, to see themselves, as Brother Darren said, um, not as fitting into these predefined roles of what a man should be, shouldn't be, but learning who you are and taking those things that apply to you and becoming better.
Awesome. Thank you, Robert. How about you, Darren?
Yeah. So for me, again, I kind of unpack a little bit of this, and one of the things I'm leaning into is manhood as maturity rather than something that's opposite based on sex or gender or some kind of other characteristics. Because I think we spend so much time trying to make ourselves other that we kind of back ourselves up into some corners. Because again, like, who said we can't be nurturing parents? Who said that we can't be the stay-at-home person who's amazing at cooking and doing housework? Like, who said we can't, other than a society that really tried to make men other in some kind of way? So for me, it's being mature, it's being healthy, it's being caring, it is being somebody who is living into who they are. So the values of this aren't gendered, but the values are more so, how do we embody wholeness? How do we embody the fullness of who we are, who we're created to be in the image and likeness of the divine, who is neither male nor female, right? Like, there's so much to us that I mean, some people use a complementarian view. It's like, well, men are only this and women are only that. But I'm like, yeah, I'm still created in the image of God, who both men and women, and those who are outside of the binary, are created in too. So I'm not gonna limit myself as a man to say, oh, well, I can only do this because I'm a man. It's like, no, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can be the full man that I'm created to be. And there are no limits on my manhood based on what women do.
That
Awesome.
is an excellent reply, Darren, because um, and oftentimes you have women that embrace those predetermined concept of what a man should be.
Mm-hmm.
And so to really walk and live in your truth, sometimes it takes a bit of encouragement,
Yeah.
being courageous just to say, hey, this is who I am, and this is who I tend to be outside of those conventional norms.
Right. And that, that even women leaning into, you need to man up, all the other stuff, is it comes from that same society that is telling us the only way to survive, the only way to be healthy, is to enforce these rules that somebody created and somebody changed. And it's
Mhm.
like, we can change too. Like,
Absolutely.
we have the capacity to define this in ways that are useful to us. maybe we don't wear powdered wigs anymore. But at one time, that was the height of masculine influence.
Absolutely.
And in the same way that changed, is the same way that we can define what's important to us in different ways that maybe are more useful than high heels, wearing pink, and wearing a powdered wig. I don't know.
Point taken. All right. Next up, we have Pass the Ballot. And I before you go past the ballot, I recognize that we have another gentleman joining us by the name of James Bentley. Welcome, James. I'm not sure if you can hear us. The question that's on the table, I'm just gonna throw you in into the water. So jump right in. The question that's on the table, and I'm gonna toss it to you after Mike Ballard, is what does it mean to be a man in your opinion, just your own experience? How do you define manhood? So Michael Ballard, I'll touch the mic to you.
Man, first of all, woo, that brother Darren over there smoking with the mic, man. Good stuff. Because you're right. I just found out that high heels were actually created for men. Like when you start really talking about the history of how things evolve, you start to begin to question what you've been taught. So I would first have to say what is male? Because now we're talking genetics, right? There's a genetic makeup that makes us male and female, which no matter what you do, you can't rewrite science. It's just a scientific genetic code of functionality between the male and the female. And I think sometimes in society, we mistake male for man, just like we just mistake male from boys. So I'll say you're male by birth, but you're a man by actions and choice. And so if I had to go with man, I have to go to the example that I have to follow. And that's Christ, who was male and man. And you see someone who was very strong, but yet compassionate. You see someone who whooped people out of a church, but yet would let someone lay their head on his bosom. So it's conflicting in when you talk about what is man, because he can be both strong and yet sensitive. He can be both an alpha and both a beta. And so I'm really honestly rethinking, because it's not as black and white as we put men in boxes. Mm-hmm. So I'm still learning what being a man means. Mm-hmm. I know what being a male is. I know what my male physiology and my biological function is. That's real clear. But I think being a man by action, because you can be both strong, but yet God also tells us to be forgiving and compassionate. He tells on one end to kill an army, and on the next, he tells you to have passion town. So I'm still learning it. And that's my honest answer to what it means to be an actual man.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Michael. Thank you for being honest. All right. Welcome, James. James, you got a camera, man. I'm going to need you to jump on this camera so we can see your face, big bro. But I'm going to toss the question to you.
Bro, I was grooming up, man, so I ain't want to.
It's all right. It's all, fellas. You good. You good. All right. So thank you for joining us. Just what I want you to do is do a quick introduction of yourself, as well as answer that question. What is manhood to you?
Okay, hold on. Let me answer my dope first.
All right.
Well, I'll start off like this. My name is James Bentley. I'm an artist, actor, all around philanthropist, good guy, the whole nine. The door locked? It wasn't locked.
Thank you.
No, it wasn't locked. Okay. And I'm up down through music, and I've been rocking with this brother for a while. You know what I'm saying? I love his spirit. You know, we're gonna do a lot of great things. But to the question, what does manhood mean to me? That's a good question. It's kind of broad for me because I have almost two-part answer. One is all my upbringing had told me that the man was supposed to work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? I got to go deep into that one. But I study African history, so that's my religion. I'm finding out that the male concept ain't necessarily built off masculinity. You know what I'm saying? That's the identifier, but it's not the determining case of a man. If you ask me, a man is someone who controls his own thoughts, actions, and energies. He doesn't let nobody invade him. He lives according to what he believes. He's unshakable. That's what a man is to me. If you're talking about how you live as a man, that's a whole other question. Okay, because how you live as a man determines on what you picked up, how you've been looking at the world. You know what I'm saying? For me, it's taking care of my kids, my grandkids, and so on. Me trying to keep my legacy intact. You know, for Daryl, I'll tell you, I just lost my son, my oldest son, 2 weeks ago. And I'm actually feeling the effects of one of my strengths, you know, because my studies told me that a man's riches was in his seed. And, you know, I've since lost that, you know what I'm saying? But being a man just means being able to realize a situation like I got, my son is gone. Can't do nothing about it. I'm hurt, but guess what? I gotta live on. Gotta live on. And I think a man is basically a series of choices to whatever is confronting you. That's how you determine. My bad, I ain't even take too long, y'all.
You're good, bro. You're good. Like I said, thank you for joining. If you can do stuff real quick, yeah, because it look like you about to get shaving or something. But I'll answer the question myself as well. And it's really again and again, I know we're gonna be wrapping up soon. I'm paying attention to the clock, but we need touch, you know, really the iceberg of what we'll be discussing. But I do want to be responsible with your time, and I do want to respect your time and so forth. So my answer to the question, and I think it was summed up in, you know, just about everything that everyone said. In my opinion, what it means to be a man is first to understand that being a man doesn't make you opposite a woman. Being a man is an anti-woman. I believe that the two gender roles, the reason why God created both male and female in his image were because they're symbiotic. They need each other. And I believe that we all came from the same father, possess qualities of both male and female. I think men have been built a certain way with, you know, more muscles and so forth, and women were built with the womb and so forth. But I don't think that either one of those particular unique qualities definitively defines what it means to own and live in that particular gender. What I believe it means to be a man is to be someone that's responsible. The Bible, and then not to preach a word or anything like that, but there was some specific tasks that God gave to Adam, and some specific tasks that he gave to both Adam and Eve. One was to tend to the field, tend to what I've given you jurisdiction over. Be responsible not only for yourself, be responsible for the things around you, the animals, toe the field, but also to be responsible for your woman. You chose Eve, be responsible for her. You said, hey, bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. But I also believe that being a man is about teaching and spreading what you've learned and what you know about life and your experience, because it says also be fruitful and multiply, meaning multiply yourself and others, teach other people what you know and spread the knowledge as whatever, because God spent time with Adam even before he made Eve. He spent time walking with Adam in the garden and so forth. So that was what I would think to be some education gestational period where he would say, now go teach Eve, and then go teach your offspring, and then go teach your offspring to teach your offspring, and so forth and so forth. So having a understanding that our responsibility is not to uphold some masculine cultural persona, but it's more holistically, it's more about what we do for our community, is more about what we do for our environment and how we care for the things that we are given responsibility over. I think a man that's lacking in that is a man that you will find wandering the world. You will find with some self-delusion about self, about how to engage with women, about responsibility, about community, and so forth. And so just to sum it up, that's what I really believe it is to be a man, to be someone that's responsible, someone that's caring for your community, someone that is really geared towards support rather than upholding an ideology of gender. Is there anything that anyone want to add before I move on to the next question?
Yeah, I want to just expand that thought and name one of the challenges, right? In history, we so often have attached our ideals of what it is to be a man, in part to what our genitals are doing, in part to who we are
Hey,
as
James,
yeah.
I'm sorry. I'll do
Yeah.
it.
Hey James, you're unmuted.
My bad.
Thank you.
No problem. But we've attached so much to the physical, to the point that if a man was castrated, we took away his manhood, as if they weren't still a whole man, as if they weren't still a whole person because they didn't have testicles or they didn't have a penis. In the same way, there were points where in the church you couldn't get married if you couldn't produce offspring. And so again, we had all these constructs that were like overly centered on genitals, external genitalia, when the reality is being a man is so much more important than that. In enslavement and in the mess that has been a country since, they would cut off men's genitals as a part of humiliation when they would lynch them. And so I think about what we have done in overly focusing on our genitals as men, but I'm also thinking about what I've learned about my own manhood as a cisgender man, that is a man who was assigned male at birth, what I've learned from trans men. Miles Brady is one of the first men in Illinois to be listed on the birth record as the birthing father. And the fight that he's had to do in his life just to be understood, loved, and live as a man teaches me so much about the privileges I have in my manhood, in my masculinity, and reminds me that, like it was my friend Austin Hartkey, when he was talking about how he finds himself in scripture, and in the earlier days of his transition, he was saying, the Bible says that man or people look on the outward things, on the outward appearance, but God sees the heart. And to literally see him live into knowing what God has in his heart rather than what these external qualifiers and disqualifiers are. That's profound to me. And I think it's an opportunity for all of us to stop necessarily looking at what our external qualifiers and disqualifiers are. It's not how full my beard is. It's not how big my dick is. It is very literally what is in my heart that God has given me and that God has made true in me. And that's my quality of manhood. And in that, it can be inclusive of everyone who God has put masculinity in their hearts.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. So here's a question I'm going to ask for everyone as we wrap up, and it's a big one, and you can choose to be as honest and transparent as you want to be on the topic, on the question. So at the beginning, I started off the conversation by explaining just what my experience with is most recently with suicide, having suicidal thoughts, particularly during the pandemic, that were at some point, it felt overwhelming because I hadn't experienced it at that level. and I was here by myself to some degree, where it just felt like, okay, I had to fight it alone. So the question is, have you yourself ever been suicidal, had suicidal thoughts? And if so, what were some of the signs and how did you overcome them? I'll begin by answering. So I gave the backstory. So I also want to kind of explain how I overcame that particular period of my life, particularly as we close out, for any men that may be struggling right now and just need some points, some tips, or on how to overcome. Again, none of us are professing to be experts on the subject. This is more of a personal experience and a personal points of view and perspective. So one of the things that I did during my time of feeling suicide, I got really deep into meditation, learning to control my thoughts and control my emotions just by quieting myself, going inside, and really becoming a master of my feelings, as opposed to allowing my feelings to drive me day in and day out and spin my head in circles, to the point where, I can see at some point, if I had a gun, that would have been an alternative. And that's real. Like, I'm not a one that's into blood, so I wasn't into the cutting myself. I don't want to do all that, but a quick in and out, if that was an option, I can see how I may have taken that option. So what I did to counter those feelings was I really began to take up meditation. I encourage meditation as a daily activity for all men, especially if you're dealing with an amount of stress, anxiety, depression, and so forth. Just learning to control your own emotions, your own thoughts, your own feelings, and really mastering that as a skill is crucial for being able to counter those thoughts and feelings. Another thing that I did was I took up an activity called tapping. I'm not going to try to explain exactly what it is or whatever, but it's where you're tapping on certain points within your body to kind of help release stress. And it's also coupled with verbal therapy to kind of help you in that stress release. If you are interested in it, I strongly recommend it. It's none ooey gooey spooky. It is really natural and is really healthy and easy to do. You can go on YouTube. I have a subscription to Gaia, and they have some amazing tapping lessons as well as meditation exercises. Another thing that I did was I began yoga. I had never really done yoga before as a I've done it maybe if I went to a gym or something, but I never did it as an exercise for my own benefit. And I found yoga to be an amazing stress relief, just taking back control of my body, being in difficult positions helped me to learn how to be in difficult positions in life, which I believe is one of the benefits of yoga. Just some of the challenges of yoga, pushing through. It helps you to learn how to push through some of life's challenges. Another thing that I did was I immediately, once I realized that I was in a state of darkness and I couldn't find my way out, I immediately hopped on a plane and I came home. I got around people that love me, people that care about me. That isolation was way too much for me to deal with. So just being home, being able to be around those who love me and who can pour positivity in me was crucial. If I did, that was probably the most critical element. Just being around those who love me and care about me really helped to jumpstart that reboost of energy and so forth. So those are some of the things I began to do. I took up a little bit more reading, but just I encourage you not to be alone. I encourage you to really learn some technique to control your feelings, emotions, and thoughts. And I encourage you to learn how to control your physical body as well as a man, because we are mind, body, and spirit. So all of those have to, as Darren spoke to earlier in regards to wholeness, all of those have to work congruently in sync with one another in order for us to function well. When one breaks down, if you break down physically, you could become suicidal. If you break down spiritually, you could become suicidal. If you break down mentally, you could become suicidal. So each one of those areas need to be addressed, not just for men, but women, and across the board of all genders, ages, and so forth. So I'm going to toss the question to Robert, then Darren, then Michael, then James, and then we could close out. So the question is, have you personally ever been suicidal? And if so, can you tell us a little bit about that? And how did you overcome that? And also, what were some of the signs that people around you could have picked up on to notice that something was off, and maybe this was an opportunity to jump in and support and so forth? We'll start with you, Robert. You're still mute, big bro.
Thank you for posing such a deep question. I can't say that I have been suicidal, but I have experienced depression from external factors and expectations beyond my control. Just to go back to the conversation we had earlier about, I think Aaron might have opened up that conversation about how as men, we were expected to be breadwinners. We're expected to to be strong. We're expected to be this predetermined definition of what a man is, and having the weight of those things on you as a person who may be in transition between jobs, or who may not have that. In my circle of friends and family, I'm considered to be a strong individual, pretty much well planned, pretty much together, brother. And I'm not. I'm just a man, so I have problems, I have issues, I have all of these other things that go on within my person. So the one thing that I learned to do, to go back to your question, Brother Fidel, is to take charge of those things, of my thought processes. Those things that are negative, those words, those programs, whatever it is that's just not aligning with my mind and my spirit, I just kind of cut them off. I started reading more. I started devoting time for self-care, exercising, spreading affirmations to others, as you meant, as far as spreading the word. Even if that means complimenting somebody. I learned to take time to just stretch and be at one with my thoughts and try to get centered, because we wear a lot of hats as men. We wear a lot of hats. A lot of them are ours to wear by choice, and a lot of them are ours to wear by design, outside of us. So just finding those ways to dedicate time for my own mental health and wellness, physical health and wellness, spiritual health and wellness, it's been huge for me.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Robert. And thanks again for joining us, bro. Next up is Darren Calhoun, DC.
I'm back. Even excuse me, even as I share my own story, I always just share and name my friend Darlene Kelly, who uh, lost her life to suicide and mental illness several years ago. And part of why I name her is that she fought. She fought to get help, to get resources, and she lives in a system that was more concerned about finances than it was about actually saving her life. Um, and so, her willingness to be very transparent with her story actually emboldens me and empowers me to share my own story. When I was probably like fifth or sixth grade was the first time that I had suicidal ideation or thoughts of ending my life. And I, at the time, was able to make it through in part because I had some good friends who just loved me and cared for me, and I didn't want to see them hurt. Um, but later in life, there's been different seasons, including a season I spent in church, trying not to be gay anymore, trying to change my sexual orientation. Um, right now, Fidel is sharing the Trevor Project website, and it's a site that is a resource for people who, particularly for LGBTQ people, but for really anyone who needs to talk to somebody. The number is right there: 866-488-7386. And they even have a way for you to text. You can text the word "start" to 678-678, and you can just text back and forth with somebody. There's online resources like online therapy, BetterHelp, different places where you are reminded that you don't have to be alone, that not having enough money is not the ultimate barrier. Um, yes, it can be hard, and I don't want to minimize that, but seeking out therapy. I'm currently in therapy. I love my therapist. She's awesome and has been instrumental in me really taking next steps and continue to be healthy and grow and address issues that have happened through life. And a lot of people say, well, I don't need a therapist because I'm not that bad. And the reality is, the best people you know probably have a therapist or at least have had a season of therapy. In the same way we go to the doctor to get a checkup and make sure we're doing good, which, as Black men, we got to do more of that,
Mhm.
is the same way that we go to a therapist and get a checkup and make sure we're doing good. The same way we go to get an oil change, not because the car is broken, but because you need to do regular maintenance to keep the car running. So I just encourage people to make use of the resources you have. Check in, looking within your network, looking within the people you know. But yeah, for me, there were some very hard, lonely nights. There were some times where I just thought I cannot keep going. Um, and in those moments, it was being vulnerable with friends who weren't necessarily trying to fix me, but who just would love me, that got me through that season. And eventually, I was able to find therapy. I was able to find a more healthy church home. I was able to find places where I could be my whole self and be loved without conditions, and grow into all that God has really called me to be. And yeah, it is not an easy road, but it's not one that you have to walk alone.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing, Darren. And thank you for joining us. Next up we have Michael Ballard, Coach My Love.
Thank you guys. First of all, thank you guys for sharing your truth and vulnerability, because that's scary to do that, and that's brave to do that as well. So thank you guys for that. For me too, I don't think I've had necessarily suicidal thoughts, but I have moments, even today, when I'm like, Jesus, if you take me right now, I'm good. If you came back right now and wrap this up, I'm good. Like,
I mean,
you
I'm
can
not
hit
mad
the
at you.
button, right? Like, you can hit the end button right now, and I'm straight. You know what I'm saying? I think me and Daryl, we talked about that. Like, you know what? If he came right now, G, my bag is back. We good. I've lived it. I'm good. Let's go on to the next movie because this one is old. You know, but as far as suicide itself, I don't know if I ever told you this, Daryl. I don't really share much because it was a long time ago. But when I was 16, my uncle blew his brains out on my birthday, and I remember that day because it was supposed to be my birthday, and we get the call. Press just shot and blew his head off. And that was the first time being introduced to suicide. Because we don't really talk about that in our community. You know, we say suicide is a white man's problem. That's white folks. White folks kill themselves. Black folks don't kill themselves. So I think that always scared me because when I saw the casket of what it looks like to see someone who blew their brains out and I'm trying to put it back together again, I think that scared me more than anything, you know, and always having the fear. I think that fear is what stops a lot of people really from doing it because you can be a believer and love God, but you like, man, if I kill myself, I'm gonna go to hell, you know. And so I just started doing research about that and finding out that there was a man, guy who killed themselves even in those days, right? And so I definitely don't think it's something that sends you to hell because God looks in the heart. And, you know, there's a lot of reasons why someone can kill themselves. It's not necessarily self-murder, which a lot of religious people have said that's what suicide is, it's self-murder, so you go to hell instantly, but that's not the case. That's not the case. And I just definitely think when I do have those moments when I'm like, Jesus, come take the wheel in the car, I just rest, you know, because what I've learned is that it's always another day. And we always tell people, don't make an eternal decision for a temporary emotional situation because it does pass when you just let it go out. So that's kind of what kept me going. So.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Michael, and thank you for joining us. Last but not least, we have James.
Hey, brothers. Thanks. Want to thank everyone for sharing and for having me, first of all. Brother Fidel, Robert, Darren, and the relationship coach. I haven't had a moment where I ever wanted to take my own life, but just like relating to a lot of you guys, I had mornings where I was like, if you don't wake me up, good. Like I'm fine with that. You know, I just really don't want to do another day. I don't care about doing another day. Not that I didn't want to, but I didn't care about doing another. You know what I'm saying? It was like, whatever you choose, it's cool. It came from a 15 plus year drug addiction and some relationship issues with my father. And ultimately, what turned it around was self-discovery, you know, just getting back into the essence of me. I heard Fidel talk about meditating, which is, I recommend that, like, seriously, for anybody dealing with anything in this earth. You know, dig inside yourself, get into yourself. All your strength is within you. And unfortunately, it took me 15 years to find that. But when I did, it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I have not looked back. You know, I didn't need no AA or anything. I kicked all the stuff on my own, just a decision. And that's why I said, we're always one decision away from everything, being good, bad, over the top, under, whatever. We're one decision away. And going back to what I said about being a man, I just wanted to add on to this. It's being in control of your feelings and emotions and using wisdom above all you know. That's a man. And that's man, woman, or being. Point blank.
Thank you so much for sharing, James. As we wrap up, I just want to thank you all for joining the conversation, joining this very important conversation, and really being transparent in your own experience and your own thoughts and feelings on the topic. For anyone that is struggling with suicide, I definitely encourage you to get help, seek help immediately. Find someone who who can help you and offer just some presence in regards to just cutting off the loneliness, cutting off the thoughts, someone who can counter those thoughts and kind of challenge you out of feeling like you're lost and alone and so forth. If you don't have anyone, I encourage you to seek a family doctor, a psychologist, psychiatrist, a psychotherapist. There are also volunteer organizations as well as community mental health institutions and centers that you can seek out, local hospitals, and any other social agencies that can be of assistance if you have mental or suicidal thoughts that are reoccurring, and so forth. As Darren stated, there are other forms of therapy, such as, talking to a counselor, as well as receiving even medication and so forth, which can assist in managing the feelings and emotions and so forth. Personally, I'm taking an antidepressant for my own struggles and so forth, to make sure that I can show up and be present and do these type of conversations and discuss them without having any relapse or, going backwards and so forth. So there are depression treatments such as psychotherapy, antidepressants, and any other combination that, can be. It don't have to be medicinal, any combination, like we said, with meditation, yoga, and so forth. But if you're having those type of thoughts, I encourage you to seek help immediately. Seek someone you trust and someone who can be with you and won't walk away, because some people feel like it's too much, it's taboo. Some people feel like it's a day thing, oh, you were depressed for a day. Those things can linger. They could reoccur. Take it from me, sometimes when they're over and they're not quite over. When you think they're over, they're not quite over. Oh, James, I didn't know your birth name was Trevor. Now you educating us, because I had no idea. Cool. Well, again, I want to thank you guys I just read it on the thing. I know people are like, where you get that from? I just read it on the little panel. So again, I want to thank you guys, Robert, Darren, Trevor, Michael Ballard, for joining the conversation. I'm going to just give a shameless plug to say I'm going to be having more conversations like this. Federo Speaks, in terms of panel conversations, are going to be broken down into 4 monthly conversations. We're going to choose a monthly topic. This month's topic is suicide, but they're broken down into 4 parts. 1, we begin with men, then we have a conversation with women exclusively, then we have a conversation with the youth, and then we have a conversation with family. For those of you guys who know women or may want to participate again in another panel conversation, I'll be reaching out, but you can also take the initiative and say, hey, Federo, I enjoyed the conversation. Feel free to let me know when you have another one, and so forth. If you know anyone that may be interested in the family conversation, for the fathers, for parents, for children who may need to be a part of the conversation, feel free to shoot them my email, which is hello@federoonline.com. Again, that's hello@federoonline.com. My name is spelled Fadarryl without the apostrophe, so don't put the apostrophe in the email, but that's my email. Feel free to reach out. And again, I just want to share my own personal love for you guys. I appreciate you. Stay strong, Black man. I'm always here. I'm just on the personal note, we're going to probably cut this part off, but if any of you guys need someone to chat with just on your own personal level through your own personal struggles, I'm here. Hopefully the door is open and the swing both ways, So with that said, I'm going to be signing off, and thank you guys again for joining.
It's a pleasure.
Much love.
Thank you. Much love.
Love.
Peace out, guys.
God bless.
Ah, ah.